Good morning, everyone, from a sunny United Kingdom, and it's so nice to be able to say that. And welcome to this special edition of LinkedIn Live. I am delighted to be joined today by Mike Zealy, who's managing partner at KPMG. A little bit about Mike. He's the, as I say, MD of KPMG Learning Services. He's got a lot of very deep experience helping organizations navigate complex transformations through people, through learning, through change. He's got a background spanning strategic workforce planning, leadership development, and culture change. He's worked with some of the world's most recognizable brands to align human potential with business growth. Do you want to expand on that a little bit, Mike, especially that last part there? Working with these brands to align human potential with business growth. It's very cool.
Wonderful introduction. Thank you, Ed, and thank you for having me. I think just fundamentally, we believe that all results and all transformation is powered by people. So if you don't make sure you get the people capability in line, you're not going to deliver the results you need and expect. And a lot of our research, we can touch on this later, a lot of our research shows that as well. So it's just something we passionately believe in here at KPMG.
That's great. Yeah, and that's kind of what we're going to touch on, I think, Mike, today. Today's session is all about demystifying great learning. I'm a big fan of demystification. I'm on the side of the masses. Everybody should be able to access information and knowledge. And we're going to cut through the noise of trends and tech to focus on what is really driving engagement, impact, and innovation in L&D. So feel free to interact. You can post your questions, and we'll get to those towards the end. Just to frame this, I think, L&D teams are under a lot of pressure to deliver more with less. So we're going to explore, Mike, I think what great actually looks like. And I'm really keen to hear your opinions. We've spoken a few times away from this, but your views are something that I agree with, but the way you frame it is fascinating. We're also going to touch on how organizations can shift from measuring completions to building capability, where technology, including obviously AI, adds genuine value without overcomplicating things. And we're going to look at how learning can become a strategic lever, not just a support function or a cost center. So if you're leading an L&D team, if you're rolling out new tech, just trying to boost engagement, there's something in here for you in the next 30 minutes. So let's start, Mike, I'm going to start with a killer question, I think, actually. We've been in this industry collectively, probably nearly 50 years, more than that, I would imagine. And we often hear the phrase great learning. What does great learning look like? But it's so loosely defined in my experience. So from your very specific experience at KPMG and with all of those clients across sectors, why do you think this term has become so misunderstood or multi-interpretable?
Oh, really good question. Really good question. I think for me, it's probably two separate areas. So is it understood, but it's also, is it valued in the same way? So some examples about, is it understood? I think many businesses misunderstand the difference between learning and training, and they may associate learning with compliance training. They may focus on the technical skills and knowledge, not the behaviors, not the capability building. And they may struggle to link it directly to their business results. That's really, really crucial. That's something we fundamentally believe at KPMG, and in every piece of work we do around learning, is to be really clear, what's the business result we're trying to drive? But I do think that there are some other questions and concerns that may be interpreted as it being misunderstood. But there are real concerns. You mentioned one of them, return on investment. In a time where people are cost conscious, is this the smartest place to invest the money? And I do hear leaders as well concerned about having to take time away from work. And there's still a mindset sometimes, isn't there, that learning isn't something you do while you work. It's something you do instead of working. So I think that whole shift is happening as well at the moment. But yeah, for me, it's those things, do they understand what modern adult learning is like and what good looks like? And do they understand the impact and the criticality it has on the business results? And can they see that causal effect?
Would you be in the camp of people that would like to see L&D functions be rebranded as performance functions?
I would. We've talked about having them chief performance or chief productivity officers rather than chief learning officers. I think if you believe that the people capability powers your business and learning builds that capability, then it's got a much wider role, I think. So, yes.
Yeah. Well, to be clear, I would as well. So I'm glad you said that. Well, I think a lot of organizations are still looking at course completions and content libraries. I'm sure you'd agree with that. But if that's the case, what steps are we going to have to take, to shift people who are spending lots of money and time looking at how many courses have been completed and buying the next LXP? How do we shift that mindset then to what you're professing they should be doing?
So let me talk about, first of all, I think what I would expect good learning to be doing and what I'd expect it to manifest as. And then I think you can get into how you measure it, because it flows fairly naturally. So I said before, first of all, passionately believe that all learning has to be linked in the workplace to a business outcome. What is it you're trying to achieve? What is the business priority you're tackling? What's the why behind this from a business point of view? Clearly, it really helps if it's what the people want to learn as well, because you look for that Venn diagram where the individual and the organization grow together. It needs to be relevant, needs to be timely, of course, needs to have an amazing experience, needs to be emotionally engaging. There's quite a few things like that, and there's a lot of why behind all of this, isn't it? So if you want to define and measure, you need to start with what's your business objectives, strategy, and results. What is it you're trying to achieve as a business? Then from there you can map through, can't you? What do you need from your people, both in terms of skills and capability, but when, where, how? What are going to be the things that are going to help you unlock your strategy? And ideally, if you have your strategic workforce plan, you'll have a skills linked strategic workforce plan, so you can actually start to talk about what you need in that future state. What those building blocks let you do then is build a much more effective way of demonstrating the impact of the learning that you're deploying. So by being clear what the business result is, you can be clear what business KPI you're trying to impact. You can be clear on the role of learning. It's quite rare that learning is the exclusive tool that you use to drive a business result, isn't it? But you need to be clear on where the learning plays its role. And then you can define from there. So how would you go about measuring that? What are the lead and the lag indicators, and move it through? And ideally be able to link it to a financial impact for the business. It's not always easy. Some learning requirements are much more driven by a vision and a feel for a business, not necessarily a tangible financial result, although it's always helpful when justifying the investment cases if there is a tangible financial result. But yeah, that for me would be the thing, really. You just got to make sure you're really clear on what result you're trying to deliver and how you're going to measure it. We talk about evaluation by design. So not something you do retrospectively to try and justify why you did a learning program. You need to think thoughtfully up front about what you're trying to achieve and how you're going to measure that, and build it into the whole experience. It shouldn't be an afterthought and a quick questionnaire.
Do you think learning professionals are good at this in 2025?
I think we're still learning how to engage with the business in this way. I think business partnering skills are really crucial here. You need people who are immersed in their kind of stakeholder groups, understand the results that they deliver. In the sales area, it's nice and easy, isn't it? There's a sales objective. That's a nice, clear, quantifiable measure. But in other areas, how do they measure success? And then how can you align what learning does to that? I think academies help in this, don't they? Because they tend to align to a business need quite clearly. But yeah, so I think we're still learning. I think we're probably also learning how to explain it to our customers. I think that's the second thing. I think actually there's a lot of science and understanding around this now that's out there. The bigger challenge sometimes is taking the customer on the journey as well.
It's funny you should say that. Actually, I posted yesterday on LinkedIn. This is going to sound like a plug, but it's actually just serendipitous that you mention it. In a kind of world dominated by AI at the moment, at the LPI, the most popular course that we have in 2025, the one that has had the most bookings on it, most people through it, is the Performance Consulting Masterclass, which is teaching people to do exactly what you're saying. And I actually believe that maybe that's now the most critical human skill for learning professionals in this year. Would you agree with that?
I think so. I think the other skill I'd have alongside it, and again, this is reflective of the conversations I have with our clients, how to partner, how to drive business results, performance consulting, very much agree. But also understanding how to reshape, transform, move the learning organization forwards behind you. So as well as being customer facing, what's your view on the role of AI in learning? What's that going to do to the learning and development team? How should you be organized for success? how do you make sure that the whole team are embracing that? So there's human skills in both directions. I guess that's my point.
Yeah, well, we were talking before this as well. That one of the most important skills, according to Satya Nadella, is empathy, and I think empathy plays a role in that performance consultancy actually. And that journey from what you're describing about, look, right at the beginning, before you start designing meaningful learning experiences, what is the success definition for this? When it all finishes, how are you going to look back at this and say we did what we were supposed to do, rather than just going ahead and building something? Learning's always been very reactive, hasn't it? I mean, it's always been told to build a course, or we need something to do this. I want these 50 people to go through this. I do actually think now there's an age of creativity that's maybe started a couple of years ago, which is empowering learning professionals. How do we reframe success then? How does learning reframe that idea of success from that concept of attendance completions through to building capability? Is the answer in data?
Well, you know from conversations we've had in the past, I'm a big believer in data and evidence. It goes with being in a firm like KPMG, right? I think that helps. You need to be clear what data and evidence you need to be able to demonstrate the impact and match them on the journey. I do think language is important as well. You need to be able to speak in the language that the business is looking for and understanding. So why might they settle on number of people who attended a course over a business result? Is they might not know of another metric that would be relevant. Are they worried about time to competence? Are they worried about time working and efficiency and optimization? There's all sorts of different metrics, isn't there? But how do we reframe it? I mean, I think we have an opportunity with the level of change that's going on in businesses at the moment. It's not just AI of the past couple of years, but if you look at the impact of disruptive technologies, if you look at new workforce models, the impact of hybrid working, what that's done for the role of human skills, some fascinating research on the changing role of the line manager, and line management skills, actually, the people skills, the human skills are some of the most important in businesses, right up there alongside digital, data, AI, all those kinds of things. So I think in the face of that, if you look at what the research says, we run a CEO survey globally every year. And every year for the past 7 years, lack of the right skills has been the top 3 risk for CEOs around the world, without fail. If not the top risk, definitely in the top 3. And if there's one thing we should be perfectly suited as learning professionals, it should be to help fill that gap. So how do we engage with that? How do we get into the workforce plan? How do we understand where those skills shortages are? And then how do we help the business address that? And how do we take advantage of these amazing new tools as well to open up new ways of doing that? I think what AI starts to do is it lets people in the wider business start to be more creative and start to develop products, doesn't it? That might look like learning. And you and I have spoken about this in the past as well. Is how do we use this current situation to really catapult the role and the capability that the business so much need into the limelight a bit more? So yeah, I think the time is now, really, with the level of skills change. If you don't, and if you're not focusing on how to build a learning culture, that's really important now, isn't it? You don't focus on getting the learning culture right, all of this stuff's just gonna fall over as well. So all of these things.
I couldn't agree more. At the OPI, the data shows that building a learning culture is still the #1 challenge, even with all of this requirement for AI. We'll touch on AI in a second, but I want to drill down on this idea of meaningfulness in learning experiences. You know that I've spoken a lot about this idea of a convenience efficacy paradox, but I'm going to quote, well, I'm not going to quote your own research in the KPMG Customer Experience Excellence report said that personalization, trust, and empathy, so that's personalization, trust, and empathy are key drivers of customer loyalty. And I've picked that out because I think I can draw a parallel between that and how we should be designing employee learning experiences. Can you comment on that for us? And I'm sorry to put you on the spot with your own research.
No, it's good. It's good. Well researched. So to round that one out and give a bit of context, so KPMG have been conducting customer experience research since 1996. We're I believe firmly in case one of the leaders in terms of understanding and gathering data to understand what makes an amazing customer experience. It comes down to, from our point of view, 6 pillars of customer experience, which they're right. So integrity, people have got to trust you. resolution, you've got to get stuff done. Expectations, was I expecting what I got and did I get it? Time and effort, did it take a lot of time? Did I feel my time was well used in doing the thing I did with you? The personalization and the empathy, as you say. About 10 years ago, we actually ran an experiment and we decided, could we apply this to learning? Is there a thing called learner experience actually? Do these sort of consumer behaviors map across into the learning world? So we started to conduct research on that, and the answer is yes, absolutely, they do. And what the data showed us is there's a direct causal link between the experience and the efficacy of the learning. It perhaps comes as no surprise if people aren't feeling great when they turn up to a piece of time they've allocated for some learning, be that in a classroom or a virtual event or otherwise. They're not in the right cognitive place. They just don't retain the information. So direct causal link. It continues to be the case. So a very long way of saying I completely agree. Learning experience and thinking about learning experience, it actually turned out to be just as important as the quality of the content in terms of how much people then retained and used the knowledge they got and built skills.
I think that's so reassuring to hear somebody like you tell us all this, because it's been driven by convenience for the past few years. And I've always felt there's a bit of an irony in the term LXP, in that there's not often in some of these content platforms, there isn't much of a learning experience going on. But I do think we have an opportunity now to create really meaningful experiences that make a difference, that can balance this idea of what AI can bring, generative AI specifically, in terms of performance support, and hopefully LX can kind of be reborn as a term. So let's move to AI, because we can't get away from it, Mike. And why should we? I'm actually a big fan of what it could do for learning and development. But often I get told, or there's a term used, increasingly so in conversations I'm having, that, do you not think, Ed, that this is just like shiny object syndrome? And it's a new one on me, I'll be honest with you. But how do you, and on behalf of KPMG, how does KPMG separate hype? And let's be honest, is there a more hyped thing at the moment than generative AI in learning? But how do you separate hype from true value when it comes to learning tech, maybe specifically AI?
Yeah. So I guess if we talk about generative AI specifically, the stuff that's probably blown up the headlines more in the past couple of years, I'm with you. I'm an AI advocate. I trained originally as a computer scientist many years ago, so I have a little bit of background in some of this stuff. I do think it's been overhyped. I think a lot of that comes from a lack of understanding, actually. We conducted, you'll get the gist. One of the privileges of being at KPMG is you get to conduct amazing research. So one of the pieces of research we did last month, actually we released it, was another global research into views about AI, sentiment, trust, literacy, things like that. So got this data for all of it. But if I share with you an example, a fragment from what the UK stats say. So this is talking about workers in the UK in the workplace. We're not talking about the general public at home and things like that. We're talking about where they're at work. And what the data said is 65% of the people surveyed said they were using generative AI in the workplace in this year. That doesn't feel implausible to me.
Yeah.
53% said that they thought it had improved their efficiency and effectiveness. Again, that doesn't feel implausible to me in terms of how people are feeling at the moment. 27% said they'd received some training on AI, which actually surprised me. But putting that in the context, that's in the bottom third of the world. So that's actually quite a low level of literacy. So 2/3 of your workforce are using it, but only 1/3 feel like it's actually they've had new training on it. What really bothered me, and this was I had a conversation at another conference about a month ago on this. 38% say they've uploaded confidential company data into some of these tools. That's a bit worrying for me. 58% said they don't check the results when it's created it. They just use it. That's a bit worrying to me as well, as someone who sort of understands some of this. And only 42% of it actually trust it. So if you come back to that experience point, that integrity piece, that's all about trust. So we need to fix some of this stuff on the learner experience.
Well, it was two of the things that you put in your 6 factors were around like trust and integrity. So Yeah, carry on, mate.
Yeah. So I think it's going to be hugely valuable. I think we can talk about what it will mean for L&D as a profession, if that's helpful too. But we've got a long way to go for organizations to learn and understand about AI, how to use these tools in the right way. And at KPMG, we've got a perspective where we talk about trusted AI. So like most people, when these tools hit, the first thing we did actually is we banned them. That lasted for about 2 weeks when it became apparent that that just wasn't going to work because people were just going to kind of use them on their personal phones or things instead. So we need to come up with a better way. So we created a policy and some safeguards and some framework. We talk a lot about strong foundations. We talk about making sure the data governance is right, the data quality is right, that we've considered the ethical considerations, and making sure that you've got all of those frameworks that give you trust in the AI. And once that's in place, it's a lot easier. It's a lot easier then to start to run the experiment safely. So in learning and development and in learning services, we're experimenting and using it in right the way across the board. I think the things where people mostly see it is in content creation, isn't it? But we think it starts a lot earlier. Actually, it's amazingly helpful for digesting data to establish what skills you need for a workforce plan, it turns out. So if you're struggling to get that, where are the secret source? It can be great for that. It's been great for needs analysis. It can be great for supporting instruction designers. And it's an amazing modality as well. So there's some wonderful innovations going on out there where people are actually using these tools as a way of learning in its own right. I'll cite one more survey. I'm getting a bit of a habit and reputation here, but we also ran a survey last year of all of our learners. We look after about 1 million learners a year over here in the UK. And 2/3 of the people said they were using generative AI tools to learn workplace skills. So my hypothesis is actually people will go where it's most convenient to learn. You talked about convenience. And I think our role as learning is to make sure that when they go there, they're actually learning and not just doing the thing and then forgetting instead, if I can put it that way.
Yeah, well, which has been a perennial issue, hasn't it, for learning, that idea of the Ebbinghaus curve. You touched on quite a few things there. I'm going to pick one out. I do think AI is complementary to what we can do as a profession. And it's another toolkit that we can use. I also think there's a startup company called Joggle out there, and they've created an AI agent that can wrap around learning experience platforms, content platforms, therefore making it easier to access the content in a way that you really need it, rather than it just being a library of content. So I think there's some real innovations happening that are genuinely going to help. What I find really interesting is you've got this balance between that happening and how crazily exciting it is to really make learning work, which is something we're passionate about. But also you've got this idea that we still want some critical thinking. You know, there's a risk, you know, you talk about people uploading confidential information or work-based information, but they're going outside of the company. So there's an element of needing to let go because people are going there anyway. But also, if we can try and persuade people by using AI to persuade them to stay in-house, because internally our learning experiences are so great and we're actually infusing AI into it, would you agree that then your comment at the beginning that, you know, a learning culture is very important within business? Do you think AI can sort of ironically be one of the ways that we can create a great learning culture?
Yeah, I think it can. I absolutely think it can, because I think as organizations embrace AI and people in the workforce embrace AI, they're expressing curiosity. You know, most applications for AI are sitting there on your desktop. And if there's one characteristic for me that sits at the heart of a good learning culture, it's curiosity and making it okay to be curious, not you know, unsafe. So I do think that really matters. I think also there are things to be learned from other industries and other sectors around how they kind of nudge people to the stuff that they want them and they need them to consume in a very helpful and experiential way. So I think, you know, what we deploy a tool very much sounds like Joggle in KPMG, we call it Spark. It understands our workforce, it understands our workforce's skills, it understands our different portfolio of learning, it understands what skills and learning objectives are met by which bits of learning, and then it's kind of nudging people to the stuff that they want to learn and we need them to learn to meet that workforce plan. It's very transparent about it. It's very explainable. Yeah. But what we're finding is people are actually liking it because it's one-to-one personalized coaching on what do I do next now in the 5 minutes I've got. And that's something that as organizations have got large, it's quite hard to get that one-to-one time and attention, isn't it? So I think it's great because it's just encouraging them to learn. We've seen, one of my team was telling me, I think an interesting stat that within the first 2 weeks of rolling that out, we saw an 8% increase in engagement with the existing learning content we already had available.
Exactly.
Handing it on.
I am not surprised at all. This is the sweet spot, I think, for AI that learning professionals should be looking at and embracing, because it's going to get people to use your content in a way they really want to use it, rather than just pumping out old forms of content. So I'm here for it. I think it's great. A couple of additional points before we maybe look to some of the questions that are coming through. But again, one of your piece of research, because you know me, Mike, I'll do my research. KPMG did a piece on UK attitudes to AI, a study, and only 34% of UK citizens believe businesses will use AI responsibly. So my question to you is, do you think that learning leaders have a responsibility to ensure ethical and transparent use of AI in the workplace? Because we tend to get given everything in a crisis. In the pandemic, we were the well-being people. Are we now expected to do that as well?
So I think it's much bigger than just learning ethical practice of a business. I think that's from the CEO, the board, all the way down, and should be throughout an entire organization. But I believe we have a really important role. I'll make a link between a few of those surveys. So one of the things I found fascinating in this year's customer experience excellence report was it was looking at the impact that AI has had on customer experience, because there's loads of things that we know go on that. We've all seen the little chatbots. Most people actually think AI is a chatbot. I've come to this one of the things we concluded. It's so much more than that in our world, of course. But what's interesting is that the KPIs that people are judging experiences by are changing. So whereas before, integrity or resolution might be measured by would I come back? Would I give you my business again? That's still true. Resolution, did you get it right first time? It now comes down to things like, do I trust the machine you've given me to talk to? That's a different question to whether I trust you or your brand. Do I trust your machine? That's quite tricky. So you need to measure some different things to see whether you're meeting the expectations. And it will be the same with employees as well. So in that level of trust, I believe it's fundamental, absolutely fundamental. We use AI in an ethical way. It's a critical skill that all organizations need to build. It will come as no surprise that it was one of the first two things that we launched as learning products in our own AI curriculum that we use both internally and with clients as well, and how you actually embed that from the leadership down into an organization. Because you want people to be curious, but you want them to be thoughtful and safe and ethical in what they do.
Yeah. So are you saying that curiosity does not necessarily kill the chat GPT? That's what I'm hearing from you.
No, I think curiosity is going to go more and more and more, and gives it even more creativity. We're entering, absolutely. I think I had someone refer to it as we're entering the age of intelligence. I'm not quite sure what that meant about the previous ages, but I quite like the term.
Concerning, yeah. Well, I've referred to it as the age of creativity. I think we're being given a toolkit that we've never had before, that allows us to do so many things at scale and make such a massive difference. Even the data gathering that you were talking about right at the beginning of our chat here, I mean, that we can do that if we use these tools properly. So, okay, a couple of questions that are coming in, a little bit more casual for you. What's one myth or buzzword in L&D that you think needs to be retired for good, and why?
Which to pick?
It's a tricky one, actually, that, isn't it? Because there's a few.
I've got a pet peeve I'll share, which is part of it. So I get niggled when people confuse evaluation of learning with did people enjoy learning. And I've one of the things that I do find myself getting a little bit niggled by is when people say this was rated 5 out of 5 by learners, like it's sort of a Netflix consumer survey. And I have to remind people that if I ask my children what they love to eat, they'll tell you ice cream. It's not particularly healthy or good for them, and it's not going to help them grow and develop, but they love it. And I think we need to pivot that back to our point we started earlier. Does it deliver the results in the workplace? It's great to understand if people enjoyed the learning, but we also need to know if it delivered the results, and a popularity check, a number of clicks, and all of those other things that sometimes people worry about do not in any way do that. So I think we need to stop conflating evaluation with popularity. I think is one of mine there.
That's a great line, actually. Yeah, I'm processing that. That could be the popularity side in the modern kind of day and age is something that really troubles me. My kids are quite a bit older now, but this concept of popularity as you grow up is now hugely important to people. It doesn't necessarily mean it's good just
Correct.
because it's popular. So that's a great message. So let's give you a hypothesis. You're now starting out, Mike, in your first role as a chief learning officer, right, in a large organization. What would be the first thing that you would do to try and engender? I was going to say build, but I don't believe you can actually build one. Engender a learning culture within that organization. The first thing you would do.
I believe passionately in the importance of leadership role modeling. We talked about the impact a leader can have when we were talking about Satya Nadella from Microsoft earlier on before this call. And the language that leaders use, all of leadership can't just be the chief learning officer, needs to show that we care about learning and building capability. You need to let people know. We've talked about psychological safety for a long time, haven't we? I know Amy's really nailed a lot of that, but it's still, lots of people still don't feel it's safe to say, I don't know. So you need it to be okay to say, I don't know, and then you can help people work out how to know. So I think leadership is massively important, first and foremost. It's absolutely essential that you've got the right tone from the top, not just from your chief learning officer, but the whole of leadership, and it must flow down. I think you need to spend a lot of time then also thinking about how you're going to enable it. If you think about the pace of skills change, how many people worry about the rate of reskilling? Is that something that organizations worry about? Or do we just worry about, whether we've delivered on our training plan? I think rate of reskilling really matters and keeping an eye on that. I think you need to be rewarding where people are sharing and taking the time to bring others on as well. So how do you bring that into your performance management regime that you have inside of the organization? Communities are massively important. How do you get the right balance of encouraging teams of people to come together and share stuff and build communities of practice, whilst also recognizing you kind of need to be moving it all in the right direction? So those are all tools I would be using, but I'd start out with the leadership. Until you've got that leadership, more than approval, commitment, advocacy, and direct support, it really is very, very hard to shift that learning culture, in my view.
So in order to get the masses in an organization to embrace the idea of learning, the first thing is to really get the buy-in from stakeholders as to what you're going to do.
Exactly.
Okay, so I'm going to push you on that one then. So obviously I speak to CLOs all the time, and one of their challenges is to get that stakeholder buy-in, right? So they're obviously proponents of having a great learning culture, employee engagement. They're living and breathing it all the time. We're preaching to the converted if we're talking to those. But you've got a vast amount of experience here. You're running KPMG's learning services. You've been in this profession for so long. What's one strategy that you've actually used that's worked for you when you're trying to get this dreaded phrase that I seat at the table? What's like a tip that you could give to CLOs?
I feel like I'm coming back to the point we started the conversation with again. But for me, it's always been around understanding the business result that they're trying to deliver. Let's take an example. Money laundering officer, MLRO, in a big bank has a very clear set of duties. The financial consequences of those duties not being met are significant for the bank. There's an imperative to act. So how do we then partner with that person to help them improve their results, remove their risks, and grow? And it's pick one, make it work. Yeah. And pick another one and make it work. If I think about we talk a lot about people-centric transformation and people-powered transformation in KPMG because we think that's the strand you must build everything else on. But as with any transformation project, you need to be clear on what are the business results, and you need to be clear on how you're going to contribute to that, and then you need that strong sponsorship. So I personally believe you've got to have a business results, you've got to have a sponsor who cares and is going to get involved and helping make it happen. And when you've got that partnership working, chief data officer running a data academy, something like that, then the magic can start to happen. You need to not be seen as a part of the HR department in the back office. You need to be seen as the skills partner who's going to help improve the performance of this part of the business and directly impact those metrics.
I absolutely love that. If this was a trailer, if we were creating a trailer for this, Mike, that would be the clip I would use. Yeah, I don't want learning in the back office. It should be front and center. I think learning should be a performance department, and I'm going to take it a little bit further. Actually, I think if we're talking to stakeholders and trying to get their buy-in, some of the responsibility has to lie with the stakeholders as well. So this idea that learning professionals or learning leaders always have to sell the idea of learning to C-suite to get them to buy in. In the businesses that I think have an incredible learning cultures, the CEO lives and breathes learning.
100%.
I mean, 2 minutes before the call started, you quoted Satya Nadella, we've got to build a learn it all culture, not a know it all culture. I've written countless articles over the last couple of years on this concept of learnership, where leaders should be learning by example. Would you agree with that assertion that, we're now living in this time where we've all got access to the same amount of information? How would you define a great leader then in the age of AI, when information and knowledge is democratized? How would you define a great leader?
Oh, that's a really good one. I think leadership development's been explored and researched a lot, hasn't it, over the years? I think what the research would tend to show is that the human skills are increasingly valued. Trust and integrity are increasingly valued. If you think about how the culture of business has changed, the importance of social value, the impact of identity, and many other things that have gone on in our worlds, leaders need to be human, accessible, trustworthy, driven towards results with a clear vision, and all of those things that we know from the traditional side as well. And they need to be out there role modeling these things. John Holt is our Chief Executive Officer in the UK. He talks passionately, absolutely passionately, about how he wants everyone to learn. It's a key plank in terms of our values and our culture. And he shows it and he expresses it. If he's in a meeting with you, he will talk about what he learnt today. That simple thing in a single conversation, saying, oh, I learned this today. This is somebody who cares about learning. So it matters. And it'll be the same on the AI side of things as well. I think keeping the businesses firmly moving towards their vision, their objectives in the right way, in the ethical way, not taking shortcuts, keeping in mind the social value and the overall trust that they need to have with their customers is going to be even more important, I think, than ever.
Yeah, that's a great point. Okay, final question for you, Mike, and it's a bit of fun, really, more than anything. What are you learning about at the moment, and where do you go to learn? Where does the managing director of KPMG Learning Services go to learn?
I feel like I'm living on Substack at the moment.
Yeah. All right, okay.
So I like to read short posts and articles. I'm not a podcast person. I don't like headphones in my ears on the train and things like that. So I like to read short articles. Actually, I'm just reading an interesting piece around the impact of generative AI on what we were talking about earlier on, the forgetting curve. So it's quite fascinating as a piece of research. And what it's basically showing is that in the same way as when the Google search engines got created and we had this sort of digital amnesia, the Google effect it was called, wasn't it? As people cognitively offload, people forget the stuff they can quickly search because they know they don't need to remember it. And what the research is showing is that generative AI tools have exactly the same effect, but amplified. I think that's a bit of a call to arms for us actually as a business. To your point about how we can get involved in AI, how many of the AI tools that are being built in businesses at the moment, most businesses are building them now, but how many of them are being designed with any pedagogical or andragogical intent? Or are we actually secretly just unskilling our workforce? Thought for the day.
Well, it's a fantastic thought to end on, and I'm sure it will create a lot of debate amongst the people that are watching this. A good friend and colleague in the industry, Sarah Clayton-Jones, runs an organization called Read to Lead. As I think we're both connected with her. And she's really linking that idea of reading with leadership in a way that I haven't seen done before. So a big shout out to her as well. Mike, we're out of time. It's been an absolute pleasure. Last time I saw you in person, we chatted for about an hour and a half in what was supposed to be a 45-minute meeting. So I'll do my best to curb this now. But there's been so much inspiration from you there. that I think will really help the learning community. Thank you for joining us. Thanks for all the questions that have come in, that I've managed to share with you. And Mike, have a great holiday. Sounds like you deserve it. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much.